Welcome back to Rounding the Bases Extra Innings with Howie Zales. I was excited about the four final questions as we round the bases because when you've covered as much in the sports world as Howie has, you have a lot of fun stories, too many for us to cover here. By the way, if you haven't listened to the audio version of the podcast, check us out on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. But Howie, I want to start with this because you mentioned having a wrestling background and shooting a lot of wrestling. That's something people don't know what the behind the scenes look like. And I watched it growing up. I don't watch it anymore. But I will tell you that one of my top probably 2 or 3 favorite interviews of all time was the late legendary Rowdy Roddy Piper, who showed up at Wrigley Field. We had a pregame show set, 2007. I'm working Cardinals at that point at Cubs. And my producer sees that Piper's throwing out the first pitch and says, we got to scratch the second segment. We got to see if we can get him on. And I'm standing in the small booth at Wrigley Field with Rowdy Roddy Piper in a kilt, completely off the cuff, as you would expect. One of the nicest guys. It was television gold. He did end up kissing me live on camera and telling me that he would change his last name, put on a yarmulke, and become Jewish for us to become a tag team partner. None of this, of course, was scripted. I'm curious what it was like to work all those years in wrestling, because I'm guessing that you saw a lot of that type of stuff.
Well, just Roddy, for example, he was hilarious, genius at what he did. And I was even at his funeral, but yeah, he was a great guy. Yeah, wrestling it's a crazy business. You know, I spent over 20 years traveling with the show, backstage. So I came across every wrestler that has worked in the last 20, 30 years. So it was a lot of fun, a lot of stories. I've had the good fortune to travel the world with them.
He was, if I got it right, because you could tell who's real, who's not. And I know people put on acts, and maybe I misread it, but once that camera stopped, he couldn't have been just sweeter in his tone. And thanks so much for having. I mean, it was so much shtick once we got. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to throw the ball into what do they call that bench over there? The dugout. Yeah, sorry, Scotsman, first game. I got no rotator cuff. I'm going to hit the Cubs. Like, you know, it was hysterical. But once that camera came off, it was just like a normal, nice human being.
Yeah, he's great. And some of the biggest stars are the nicest of people. Yeah. The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, the nicest guy you'll ever meet. He'll stay and sign every autograph until the last person's there. Wow. John Cena, probably the second biggest star behind The Rock. Same thing. Every autograph. He's done more Make-A-Wishes than anyone in the world.
I love that. And I always say to people too, that I love to tell, whether it's the superstar or the, you know, the role player, so to speak. I love to share about the ones that do that.
Yep.
And the ones that don't, I don't really want to let people know about it, because you don't want to ruin people's, you know, perceptions of their heroes. They shouldn't have to see the bad side of it. That's one of the negative parts of our business, is we see it all, and you become kind of immune. You become kind of numb to it. But you tend to appreciate then those guys that go above and beyond. So of all of the, I love and hate this question because it's always hard when people ask it to me too, but of all the places you've been, and we're talking Winter Olympics and mega events all over the world, do you have one or two, whether it be moments, locations, that stand out? Because look, in the middle of it, every now and then the heart rate can get going a little bit more. You do recognize as a fan that it is a big moment. For the most part, we're used to it. But do you have a moment or two that stand out in your head?
Yeah, 3, if that's okay.
Sure.
When the U.S. women won their gold medal in Beijing at gymnastics, when they won again in London, and then I was with Bob Baffert when he won the Triple Crown, 2 years ago now, 3 years ago, however many years ago it was, at Belmont Park.
Pretty cool stuff. So you did a lot of horse racing, and that's a sport that I don't know a ton about, although my wife and I went during the All-Star break. We were out east, and then I was going to end up in Cooperstown for Buck O'Neill's Hall of Fame induction and huge ties to Kansas City. So we went up for a day to Saratoga Springs, which is really cool. Just to like, I threw a few bets down, but I didn't know what I was doing. If I had a friend with me that understood it, I hadn't gone in years. we had the track in Chicago where I grew up, Arlington, which no longer exists. The Bears might end up there, by the way, for with a new stadium. But I don't know a lot about it. But there's kind of an aura almost in going back.
I've been doing the Kentucky Derby and horse racing in general for 20 or more years. I wouldn't even know how to place a bet.
Yeah, but there's a feel at the track, isn't there? There's just like almost like going back in time. It felt like to me.
I think the Kentucky Derby should be on everyone's bucket list. You should see that. And there's other events too, right? An Olympics, especially if it's on our soil, that should be a bucket list event for everybody. Just the feel at the Olympics, at the Kentucky Derby, you can't be matched.
Yeah, the Kentucky Derby will be added to my bucket list of things to do when I'm not doing baseball anymore. All those things, like the Masters too, that are going to fall under a time where I'm generally somewhere for baseball. But that's super cool stuff. I saw that you have done a little bit of work at some point. My third question here with Travis Kelce. I'm throwing out some fodder here to the Kansas City audience that is listening. Met him in one of his early years here. He came backstage. We were doing pre and post game shows for the Royals in the playoffs, and we're downtown with 10,000 people in the audience, and he's backstage with us hanging out. But one of the nicest guys that you can meet. Go ahead.
Absolutely. We did 3 or 4 live streams with him. He had our computer equipment, 3 or 4 live streams with him during the end of the 2021 season. That's when they went to the Super Bowl, right? It was 2021. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So in 2021,
2020 season, is it 21 Super Bowl?
2020 season, but the playoffs were in 2021.
Right. It all blends together for me. I think that sounds right. I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't even remember who won the World Series last year. That's not true. It was the Atlanta Braves. Anyway, last question. You know how that is, though, by the way. But you move on to the next event and the next event. Final question, my walk-off. We talked a lot about your business, HJZ Productions, and the pivot into live streaming, whether that be religious services, getting together with the rabbi, or whether it be these high-end athletes like the Magic Johnsons of the world and getting the plug in. What do you think's next, or where is this all going?
Yeah, we're just trying to, scale our business, gain some new clients. We really find these big corporate meetings and events technically challenging, especially when you add people in whatever location you're in, and then the remote guests. That's the challenging part, which we love. And then what's going to be big in the next 2 years, which we're hoping to get into, is the live shopping from your mobile device.
It never stops. It never will, by the way.
No.
That's part of the fun of it. So great stuff, Howie. Again, enjoyed it. I hope everyone will listen to the audio version of our podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Howie's website, his company's website is hjzproductions.com. Again, Howie, really appreciate you spending time today.
Thanks so much, Joel.